Support for this podcast comes from Frito-Lay and the 2023 Snack Bracket Championship. The Frito-Lay Snack-It Challenge is underway, and fans are voting on their favorite snacks to crown champion. We're talking about prime-time matchups between the best 64 snacks in the land. Will Ruffles Ridges reign supreme? Can Doritos defend their dynasty? Or will Smart Food use their smarts for a surprise upset? Only you can decide. Get in on all the action for a chance to win up to $1,000 or a year's worth of snacks. Let your snacks be heard. Just go to fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com to vote and enter for a chance to win. No purchase necessary. Sweepstakes ends April 3rd, 2023. Void where prohibited. Year's worth of snacks awarded in the form of 52 coupons, each good for one bag of chips. See official rules at fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com.
Hey folks, this is Jeff here. Just a little note before we begin the show. We recorded this prior to the news that broke on Tuesday night that UCF would be hiring, or is expected to hire, former UCF quarterback Darren Hinshaw as the new offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach. We have a story up on Black and Gold Banneret about that, so I just wanted you to bear that in mind before you start the actual show. We'll talk a little bit more about the hiring of Hinshaw and any other news on football in our next show after this, but until then, enjoy this one.
This is the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Now, here are your hosts, Jeff Sharon and Eric Lopez.
Welcome to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Jeff Sharon with you here. We've got Andrew Glukov, Stat Boy Drew in the house. We've got Bryson Turner in the house. Hey, listen, Happy New Year to everybody. Hope you enjoyed our Mike Kruzek podcast. We're kind of like easing into the new year a little bit with this one and with that show, and then this one kind of being like a part two to that, because, you know, normally we post the show later in the week, but we're going early in the week to kind of review UCF football for 2022 after the Military Bowl, and we're also going to update you a little bit on hoops, but not too much. But Drew is here, Bryson's here. Let's go ahead and get started. Make sure you follow us, UCF Banneret _SBN on Twitter, also Black and Gold Banneret on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube as well. And guys, let's dive on in with our sort of now that we've had a few days to digest UCF football, the anger and rancor has hopefully worn off somewhat. I don't know if it has online just yet, but anyway, we got a poll out there on our on blackandgoldbanneret.com or Black and Gold Banneret on Twitter. And as of right now, it's still up there. But here's the question: 2022 UCF football, guys. Here's what we're looking at. Finished 9-5, 6-2 in the conference, second place in the American. We beat Cincinnati at home. We beat Tulane at Tulane in the regular season. We won the war on I-4. I know how important that is. However, UCF lost 3 of their last 4 games, including the American Championship at Tulane. Granted, second, split in Tulane. Lost the bowl game to Duke. And so how do you evaluate UCF football's season? We put it out there. And the results as of right now are pretty interesting. We're leaving this up there for a few days, but 153 people have voted as of Monday afternoon. 53% success, 47% failure is what they're saying on this season. My theory on this is I think people are people's judgment is clouded by the end, how the season ended. And when you step back and look at what UCF was able to do, we did outpace our preseason expectations. UCF was picked 3rd in the conference, finished in 2nd. Had a chance to win the conference championship game, but didn't. But you know something? How would everyone feel if UCF had lost the game on a field goal at the end, as opposed to how UCF actually lost the game? UCF actually had a better season overall than last year. I know that the win percentage is different, but you played one extra game because of the conference championship. if you throw the conference championship out, UCF finished 9-4, which is the same exact record as last year. And we beat Florida in the bowl game, who was 6-6 coming in, as opposed to Duke, who was a better team in the bowl game this year. And it's funny how bowl games do affect how you evaluate the season at the end, because it just leaves a loss kind of leaves a bitter taste in your mouth. A win, you're kind of heading into the offseason feeling a little bit more positive. So I start with you, Drew. How do you evaluate UCF's 2022 season? It's last in the American before joining the Big 12.
Well, I always look at it as how do you do compared to the competition around you? As you said, selected third originally, ended second. 9 wins is never a bad year when you look at the grand scheme of things. I mean, the last thing you want is to create, as I say, create your Frank Solich moment. Where Nebraska fired Frank Solich, who was the man who followed the man, following Tom Osborne after a 9-win season, and karma has been biting them ever since. They had a couple blips here and there, but for the most part, had been massive failures ever since.
And then he spent 20 years at Ohio and actually had a pretty successful run there.
Yeah, I mean, he ended up being like George O'Leary was to UCF. He rode in Athens, Ohio, until he was ready to call it quits. But the other thing that isn't being mentioned is the recruiting class of 2022 at the time was one of the best recruiting classes UCF has ever had. Mm-hmm. So there's on the field and there's off the field, and that all part of the same season when you kind of look at it. So I like to look at the successes of it. I like to look at what did UCF do right. They recruited well. They're improving that. And they're able to use the upcoming Big 12 affiliation as fuel for that. They beat better teams than they did in 2021. Tulane, better team than any team that they've beaten. Cincinnati, better team than any team that they beat in 2021. And yeah, there was a bad loss against Navy, much like last year. It was a bad loss. And sure, the bowl game didn't go well, but here's true. Bowl games are glorified exhibition games. They really are. They always have been. I mean, hell, it wasn't until 1968 that the AP poll actually crowned a national champion after the bowl game. It was always done before. And then it took another 5 years for the coaches poll to do that. They would crown the championship before. So the bowl game was literally an exhibition game. So, I mean, we got to take it for what it is. Sure, UCF didn't look great. They struggled. The defense looked out of sync early on because you had so many new pieces in. But as the game wore on, they got better and better and better. And you have to be excited about that. Sure, 30-13 doesn't sound good, but you got to be excited. These guys got extra practice time. They got time to start gelling, getting ready for the next season. This is about looking forward at this point. You have to smile walking out of this because there's a lot of good things looking forward on this team. Granted, they're going to have to grow up real quick and get, improve real quick when they step up in competition. But you can't help but feel encouraged by what you saw from these young freshmen, the Henderson brothers, Lee Hunter, Nikai Martinez. I mean, these are young cats who are doing good things for this program. Plus, with the news that Jason Johnson's coming back, he's the lead tackler.
Big win on that one.
You're seeing a lot of good stuff. So I think a lot of it is: do you look at things glass half full or half empty as a person? And I think that's going to dictate whether you look at the successes of the season versus harping on the failures. Because, yeah, there were failures. The close of the season, 1-3, not good. There are people who are hung up on the quarterback issue, which, in my opinion, is a very flawed argument. If Mikey Keene started, we would have won 11 or 12 games. One, you can't guarantee that. Game plans change. Incident, freak things can happen, injuries, you don't know. Then there's always the chaos factor of any team can win any game on any given day. So, you don't know if that would actually happen. And, go to the other timeline and see, and if they ended up with 8 or 9 wins, perhaps they're calling for a quarterback change there. So I mean, I don't buy if we start another quarterback, blah blah blah. You got to deal with what's in front of you. The only quarterback issue I have a true issue with was the handling of Tommy Castellanos' red shirt. That was a failure of this year, a massive failure, in my opinion, on this year. But you have to weigh the successes and the failures. I think the successes outweighed the failures, and that's why I voted in this poll, and I voted as a success.
Bryson, what's your take on this?
So I like that Drew said, are you a positive or negative person? Because you said the results of the poll are interesting. And I think that's a major part of why this result is so as close as it is. I actually did not vote, and you can look on that Twitter. I said a bit of both, because I think that I can agree with you in that I do smile going into the 2023 season. I think this shows promise for that. I think everything that we saw this season, I think indicates a generally positive direction going into the Big 12. With the recruiting class that Gus has had, they still have to have time to develop. The Henderson brothers look good. We'll have Jason Johnson back. I think they'll be able to regroup very well going into 2023. That I will not argue on with that. 2022, from the beginning of the season up and from the fall around then till today, I think it's going to be a very, very close, but I am going to say that it's a quote unquote failure in that you could have done of all the money that you left on the table. I'm going to use the analogy that UCF left money on the table this season, and I think that the feelings of feeling like that is valid. So and now, granted, overall, still good. We did do better than expectations. The problem, though, in my opinion, is sort of like this. You go into a casino, you have $100 that you're going with, okay? You do some games, you end up getting $200, and you're like, oh, wow, okay.
So you're playing with house money.
I'm having a good day, right? But then you lose, say, $50, $75, and you walk out of there with only $125, $150, and you're like, well, dang, I could have walked out of here with $200. So it's one of those things where UCF could have easily walked out of this season with $200, which is the hosting a conference championship game, maybe hosting college game day, maybe winning the American Athletic Conference Championship, had they not lost a game that they really should have won in Navy, which they had lost to them the previous season. And I can understand why that game is extremely frustrating. I'm sure people are still a little frustrated that ECU, out of all the things, ECU is the one we lost to. And the fact that we beat Cincinnati, Tulane, and SMU, who were ranked higher than us in the preseason expectations, I think gives the impression that we really should have won those games. So it's one of those things where you do some great things and you do some not so great things, and there isn't really that much of a middle ground. And so people take the negative side, because if you did all those really good things, you really should have been able to pull off those ECU and Navy wins, especially the Navy win, which could have, again, allowed the hosting of the conference championship game and all that. And then everything spiraled from there. So feeling like this season was a failure is valid, but I think overall it's still good. But I think feeling like a failure is still very valid, if only you can say, like, look, things are going to get better next year. So don't be so dour about the program in general. You know what I mean?
I got to play a little devil's advocate on the whole East Carolina thing, because I know that's an area that a lot that fans are going to harp on, because that did cost UCF College game day. I mean, East Carolina was one of those teams that could score 50 points one day and 10 points the next.
Yeah, very Jekyll and Hyde team. Although, to be fair, they did finish 8-5 this year. By the way, Louisville, who UCF lost to in the second game of the season, also finished 8-5 this year.
Mm-hmm. But look, they had a 1-point loss to NC State to open the year. They obviously took it to UCF. They lost by 2 to Cincinnati. They curb stomped a Coastal Carolina squad in the bowl game that lost their coach, but didn't lose their star quarterback. So, I mean, this is a team that, and they beat BYU away right after the game against UCF. So I mean, this was a team that was very back and forth. UCF just caught them at the right time, and it goes to show how ill prepared the players of UCF were against a road team in a real road game, because that was really their first real road challenge, and that was almost the end of October.
Yeah,
that in itself is a different kind of failure. I don't think the East Carolina game itself is the failure. I think the preparation of mental toughness towards that was where the failure came into play.
One thing I did want to bring up here, and I think it's interesting when we look back at the final analysis of the schedule. Remember the stretch that we talked about where UCF didn't leave the state of Florida until October 22nd, right?
Which is that ECU game.
Which was that ECU game. And in those first 6 games, UCF was 5-1. The only loss was to Louisville. The Knights played 5 of their last 7 on the road. And that doesn't include the bowl game, I should say. 5 of their last 7 on the road. In those 5 road games, they finished 3-2. And of course, one of them was the South Florida game. And then, of course, you talk about the Duke game, which was obviously a neutral site game, but I think we almost have to kind of count that. I almost kind of want to count that as a road game because you're not playing in the state of Florida. There wasn't really the atmosphere like we would have had for a bowl game within the state. And they lost that one too. So, I mean, I could argue, and obviously, Duke fans will be like, well, then it was a road game for us too. And I get that, although Raleigh is closer to, or Durham is closer to Annapolis than Orlando is, let's just be honest. And they're more used to that, how cold it was that week. I just think it was, the fact that the back half of the schedule was so, Southwest Airlines notwithstanding, good point, Bryson. The back half of that schedule was so loaded with road games that that played a factor into how UCF finished the season. I think that played into how tired the team was, because they looked tired at the end of the year.
Well, the truth is you play the schedule in which you're given.
Yeah, it's true.
And that conference championship game at Tulane was of their own design. They're stumble.
I mean, the reason
Navy
why it was in New Orleans was you
happened.
Lost one home game against Navy. You're right.
Yeah, they made that bet. So you have to accept that truth. And you look at the first game against Tulane, the second game against Tulane, and it's hard when you play a team twice. Look at TCU and Kansas State.
Especially on the road.
Yeah, TCU and Kansas State's a good example. I mean, you play a team the second time, the advantages you brought the first time aren't there anymore because they know you. And it's harder to win that game, even if you're the better team. And as we know, TCU is the better team as opposed to Kansas State. That was the case where the better team didn't win the game, but better team doesn't always win the game. UCF's a better team than Navy. Navy won the game. So it's hard when you play a team a second time, especially in their house. They have all the advantages going in. They got the chip on the shoulder from the first loss. They've got the home court. They've got everything going for them, and it's always hard to break momentum on a road game. And while it was a conference championship game, it's still a road game. It's in their house. It's not like what we'll see in the Big 12, which is going to be a true neutral game at Jerry World. So I think that's part of it. Is they kind of made their own bed, and then they were handicapped having to play a road team, a game on the road for the second time.
Let's talk about the quarterback situation. John Rice Plumlee has one remaining season left. Tommy Castellanos is ostensibly the heir apparent, but Timmy McClain is also in the mix. Dylan Rizek is planning to come in as well as a freshman. On a scale of 1 to 10, Drew, how confident are you in the quarterback situation heading into spring practice?
I'll be honest. I'm going to give kind of like a 6.5. As we saw, John Rice Plumlee is a run to set up the pass kind of quarterback. He's an athlete. He's an athlete first, quarterback second. Throwing the ball is not his natural state. And there were times where he looked real good, and there was times that he did not. That consistency hurt this team. However, what made up for is the fact that he was a running back at all times behind the line of scrimmage. And even when he was coming back from his hamstring injury, he still was a threat to tuck and run. He just didn't have the same explosiveness. And that materially hurt this team at the end of the year when they were blowing him out at USF. He gets hurt, leaves the game, the wheels fall off, and things just start going wrong. Right. There was big shift there, and then it took a miracle out of a couple of receivers to save that game. Him, and plus the other thing is going into baseball, you have to unlearn and relearn because your throwing styles are different when you play baseball versus when you play football. So is he going to be able to deprogram and reprogram from one sport to the next and maintain what he nees for the season? That opens the door for McClain and Castellanos. Let me
give. I'm sorry, Drew, but I wanted to give at least a little bit of context on Plumlee right now, because 63% passing, 2,586 yards, 14 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, 862 rushing yards, 5.4 carry, another 11 touchdowns. I know what you're talking about with like baseball coming up, and he does plan to play baseball this spring, deprogramming and reprogramming, but I'm not sure I buy that quite a bit, because to me, JRP is like a full-blown athlete. He's not as specialized as you would. Now, if he was more specialized, I could see where you're coming from.
Well, it's a mental thing. It's It's not physical. So you have to, it's all mental. So you have to kind of,
it's a little bit physical.
Well, no, the physical comes from the mental. If you're, you've got to, mentally work to reprogram your body. And that takes time. We saw it early in the year where he had some struggles with his accuracy. And part of that was, in camp and whatnot, was because he was relearning the position.
Well, I was going to say, like, how much of that is actually the fact that he was actually playing quarterback for the first time in 3 years?
I mean, it's part of it, but you're going to run into to a lesser extent, the same trap where, you're in a different sport. The way it operates is it's not like when D Brown played baseball and football, he wasn't a quarterback. He was a running back. So obviously the demands are different from one to the other. So it really falls on him. Can he rise up to that challenge of being able to switch from one to the other and maintain a good enough, technique and accuracy to keep the job? So it's going to open especially in spring practice, it's going to open the door for the other guys, McClain, Castellanos, to get a chance, because he's going to be focusing on baseball. I can't see him being able to do both really well at the same time. That's going to cause problems. So I think it's going to be a focus on the other quarterbacks in spring football and spring practice. And that's where you're going to really see a possibility of separation. As we saw this year, Castellanos' red shirt was mismanaged, mishandled. It was burned for nothing. It was burned for nothing. Got really no return on investment on it as a result. And now he comes in as a sophomore, and he's got to, he's got to have the game slow down from. But the progression from freshman to sophomore is, it's normal for a freshman to have the game be too fast for you. And as we saw in the conference championship game, the game is still too fast for him. That mental maturity, the physical growth that comes at the same time with the strength and conditioning program, that game's going to slow down during the off season. So that freshman to sophomore development will be huge, but it's not uncommon to see a quarterback make that jump from very timid, tentative freshman to more confident sophomore. We've seen it multiple times. So he'll get his chance. He'll get his chance if he wants it.
What do you think, Bryson, about the quarterback situation? Are you still feeling like heading into the spring, he's the guy? Is he the leader in the clubhouse right here, or do you think there's going to be more of a competition?
I think it's going to be more of a competition. I'm with Drew on that. I think John Rice Plumlee, it's clear that he is a likable person. I think that the players will fall behind him if he wins the job. The real question is going to be, will he win the job? And I just can't say for certain he will, because again, he will have his attention on baseball. That is part of it. But there's also the fact that one of the reasons that we all kind of knew that Gus was going to go with John Rice Plumlee from the beginning of the season is because he is the person on the offense that fit his style of offense better. Now but he's now had a whole season with Timmy McClain and Thomas Castellanos where they can learn his offense. And so John Rice Plumlee, I think, felt a lot more like somebody who came in, already knew what was going on, and that way they could let Timmy McClain and Thomas Castellanos come in and just let them do their thing, and let them develop and let them learn. Now that JRP is going to be going to baseball, they also have a chance to learn in spring practice, and I think that will give them a chance to really adjust to Gus's offense, and then it's going to be a much closer competition, because when John Rice Plumlee's stats were solid this season, but they were inflated, I think, by a lot of the lower opponents. Like when you look at him in the bigger game, Louisville, Cincinnati, Navy, and the Tulane games, they leaned a lot more on his rushing, and his passing wasn't as good. And so that that kind of let the defense really hone in on that. And that's, of course, where Tulane went, and that's how Navy got us. So I think that now that JRP is going to be going to baseball, we're going to see development from Castellanos and McClain, and then it's going to be a more wide open competition. Now, will this divide the locker room? Who knows? People do like Plumlee. He's a very likable person. But I think that if Timmy McClain or Castellanos, show that they can succeed, then Gus will go with them. So who really knows at this point? But I think it's going to be a lot closer than a lot of people realize.
Let me flip over to the other side of the ball real quick. Drew, the defense in the first 8 games allowed 17.6 points per game. In the last 6, they allowed 31.7. What happened?
Well, I mean, you dealt with injuries. The loss of Quadric Bullard tend to be actually was a bigger hit than we probably anticipated, and that correlation may closely line up to where he got knocked out, and because he was one of the leading tacklers on the team, so that played a role, and guys just wore down. Then you also had the backloaded road schedule. Teams are going to play better at home, and UCF is a really good home team. Well, others can play at home too and do pretty well. And UCF started running into that trap. You played Tulane, you played you played a rivalry game, which weird things happen in rivalry games. And that game against South Florida, when Plumlee was in, things were just humming in the first half, and then he pulled out because of his leg, and the wheels fell off, and it took a miracle to walk away with that win. Rivalry games are weird. You almost have to write them off as their own category. It doesn't matter what your record is. You're both coming in at 0-0 because anything can happen. And we saw that in real time. And that was, I think we lost a few years in our life because of it. And then, you go to the bowl game, and, UCF's lost a lot of depth. They had 3 corners on their 2 deep. 3. That was it. Yeah, I was not nervous about them playing. I was nervous about someone getting hurt and having to find someone to step in. Luckily, there were, the injuries where we didn't have a problem on the field when it came to injuries. Duke came in at full strength, and people are like, "Oh, you're making excuses." It's not so much making excuses, except establishing what's reality. Reality is UCF had a number of players out because of early draft or transfer. Duke was playing at full strength. So you have two different teams, two different dynamics at this point coming in, and results show. Xavier Townsend, young guy, handled the ball more than any receiver on the team. He wasn't supposed to be starting. That was Ryan O'Keefe's spot he was in. So Ryan O'Keefe was supposed to get the ball that many times. And yeah, Townsend has a lot of potential, but we saw he's still got room to grow as opposed to a seasoned veteran like Ryan O'Keefe. So the offense struggled, led to some situations the defense had to deal with, especially that one touchdown with the short field after the failed fourth down. So I think the defense did fine at the end of the season with the young guys coming in. It's just you're gonna get hiccups when guys start getting hurt, worn down, and you play that heavy road back end of the schedule.
Interesting. I almost forgot about when Bullard got hurt. Which game was it? I think it was that Memphis game, wasn't it?
I'm not 100% sure on that. I just know it was into the second half of the schedule, and after that productivity went down.
Right.
But he was from a defensive back standpoint, he's the best tackler on the team on the defensive backfield. So you lose that. That's material. Kobe Perry did a great job stepping in, but Quadric Bullard was a starter for a reason. I mean, you can't replace that.
So let's wrap this bit going in right now. Do you see? So let's talk about this in terms of
Bullard played in 7 games this season, by the way.
Yeah, it was the Memphis game that was his last game. But he only had 4 tackles in that game. I'll have to go back and look and see exactly when he got hurt. But my question to the both of you, and I want this to be kind of rapid fire real quick, is heading into the Big 12. We got TCU playing in the national championship game. All right. And obviously we don't know the schedule. We were hoping to know it by now. Then Texas and Oklahoma did their thing again. But the trend line for UCF heading into the Big 12, in a positive direction, flat, in a negative direction, where do you see it? Drew?
It's a positive direction. There's still a lot of work to do, but it's definitely a positive direction. You had your best recruiting class last year. 2023 is looking to be even better. You got some really good 4-star guys come in. You flipped players from schools that would normally take your players. Things are looking up, and there's going to be a learning curve. There's going to be a growing period that UCF's going to get smacked around a bit. No doubt about it. But I mean, you can't help but be positive on the trajectory of this program to even where it was 2.5 years ago.
Bryson?
I'll say also a positive direction. I think that I think UCF's gonna have to take their lumps, but we're still not in the position where Gus Malzahn's first really good recruiting class, like that 2022 recruiting class, is still only going to be sophomores. So I think that we're not really going to see the real big fruits of Malzahn's recruiting labor until 2024, maybe 2025. So I think it's going to be more along. We're going to have to wait until then, and then we'll see potentially UCF could do really, really well in the Big 12, maybe in those 2 years. But for 2023 purposes, I think it's nice to get settled into the conference, get to know everybody, kind of get to know everybody. If we get Cincinnati and Houston on the schedule, beating them would be very nice. But I think it's about just getting used to the Big 12, getting used to the Big 12 opponents, and getting yourself ready for what the Big 12 is going to give you. And maybe we might have a good season. Maybe we won't. Maybe it's going to be just like this season where maybe we do better than expected, but then we have a stumbling block and then people are going to look like, oh, it was a bad season. Who knows? So I think that next season will be a lot better, because at least now we're going to be in the Big 12 doing what we're doing instead of being in the American.
Can I make one real quick point too? People have been saying, as we've been evaluating the season, well, the American was weak this year. I don't buy that. 7 of the 11 teams in the American finished above 500. You know how many teams out of the 10 in the Big 12 finished above 500? 5. Half the Big 12 finished above 500, whereas 7 out of 11 in the American finished above 500. And I know competition's different. Okay, I get that. But my argument here is the conference wasn't as weak as everyone thought it was. And I don't think you can say that it was weak because Tulane won it. I think that's where people kind of make the mistake. It was, like as though Tulane is not allowed to have a good season, right?
Oh yeah.
Who were at the top of the league? It was Tulane obviously won it, but then right after that, UCF, Cincinnati, SMU, Houston. Exactly who we thought would be there in that top half of the conference. So I still think this was a strong year for the American.
Strong year in that, it's a group of 5 strong year. Tulane was never going to get consideration for the college football playoff, but TCU
as we've shown,
the national championship game.
Right. But as we've shown, UCF wasn't considered for the college football playoff after winning 25 consecutive games. And Cincinnati wasn't considered it until they had their second consecutive year of however many wins in a row. And it was an off year for everyone else that enabled them to get in. So, I don't think that's, I think actually the American was weaker the year that Cincinnati made the playoff. As opposed to this year, I think that the conference was a lot stronger overall.
I will argue that from top to bottom, I will completely agree. I think I will agree with that. The American was a lot stronger overall. That really wasn't my point when I was saying earlier. My main point is that in the Big 12, from a year in to year out basis, UCF has a chance to make it into the college football playoff is kind of what I'm talking about here.
Oh, that's correct.
And I think
just
that
the mere fact that they're there, yes.
And I would take a bad season or a relatively okay season in the Big 12 than in the sense that at least we had the chance with the schedule we have. Even Kansas has a chance to make the college football playoff if they can make it to the Big 12 championship, and they were horrible before Lance Leipold. So all you need
Andrew Wilcox's favorite head coach, Lance Leipold.
All we need is a chance, and we're going to start getting those chances in the Big 12. It's going to take a little bit before we can take advantage of those chances because we have to get to know everybody, but the chance is there. And I think that's what a lot of people should really kind of take solace in and with this conference transition. And now that we're finally going to go there, we're finally going to get it.
All right. So we'll wrap it up from there. We're going to have some more content coming out over the course of the month as we kind of wrap up UCF's 2022 football season. And I think we're heading into an era in the Big 12 of that will be positive. Will be interesting to see how the schedule shakes out. First of all, what does TCU do against Georgia? Boy, those semifinals were great. Really great semifinals this year. And Sonny Dykes, man, 1 year, SMU to TCU, has them on the cusp of a national title. And then here we come, along with Houston, Cincinnati, BYU. We'll see what the schedule shakes out with Texas, Oklahoma, ostensibly leaving after 1 year, but we don't know that for sure. Just a lot to discuss, a lot to talk about going forward as we head into the offseason in 2022. And that's our hope, to kind of break down what we saw from this or heading into 2023. I can't believe it, 2023, man, as we head into this offseason. So let's take a quick break. When we return, we'll get Kyle in here to talk a little hoops. UCF giving Houston all they could handle on their home floor. And we'll also talk about the women's team as well as they head into conference play as well. Stick around. Black Gold Banneret Podcast, back after this.
Today's episode is brought to you by Cars.com. With over 2 million vehicles and 50,000 more added every day, Cars.com will match you with the perfect car for you, your budget, your life, your style. And if you're ready to say goodbye to your current car, Cars.com will get you an instant offer to cash it in. Just start by entering your license plate and get matched with a local dealer who will write you the check. So whether you're looking to buy or sell, just go to Cars.com. It's magical.
We are back here on the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Jeff Sharon with you along with Bryson Turner. And joining us now for this segment, Eric Lopez. ELO is here. Student of the game Kyle Nash is here. And I just wanted to, some news broke in between when we recorded segment 1 and segment 2. And I wanted to get these guys' takes on it. Matt Lee has announced he has entered the portal. Unexpected, although it should be noted, Lee was here for 4 seasons. So he has ostensibly been here enough time to collect his undergraduate degree and still has 2 years of eligibility remaining. I think if it weren't for the COVID year, this would be considered a graduate transfer, but he has 2 years of eligibility remaining. Nonetheless, a blow to UCF's offensive line for sure. Not to mention the guys who are graduating. And Kyle, I wanted to get your take on this because you know this better than anybody else on the staff. I think Lee was was one of the stalwarts on that front.
Sure.
And has been for quite some time. Everyone remembers the bumpy start in that game against ECU in the COVID year, but A, that wasn't his fault. And B, since then, he's been one of the best centers in the American. He moves on now. Where does this leave that group of 5 guys?
Yeah, let me build on that too a bit, Jeff. Like during 2021, his sophomore year, where after Kalia Davis got hurt, Gus Malzahn referred to Matt Lee as the best football player on the team. Okay, so I know a lot of people out there are cheapening. Oh, Matt Lee is just another lineman that's leaving. Who cares? You're dumb. Flat out, full stop. You're wrong. Matt Lee is a big loss. It's unfortunate. And I don't fault him for leaving. This day of NIL, we as a panel, I should say, this show has always been pro mobility within the college football ranks and NIL and transfer portal and all that. But
hold on, I don't think you should. I don't think we should blame this on NIL. I just want to be clear on that.
Oh yeah, and we're not blaming this on NIL.
Right.
We're not. I'm just saying in general. As a crew, as a show, we've always promoted that mobility. We've had no issue with it. But from a football perspective, this is a big deal. I mean, now the only real returner, and Jeff's going to correct me when I get his name wrong again, Lokahi Paole, is going to be the only lineman really returning, as I understand it, right? Because Swoboda's off, I believe. So
Lokahi Paole.
No, it's okay. So I got closest than I have.
Lokahi Paole.
I could get his first name right, but the Paole, But it's Paluma is broom.
It's okay. I get paid to do that anyway.
So it throws me off, and I don't want to call him a broom, and it gets awkward. Anyways,
I went through the same thing on media day, Kyle. Don't you worry. You're not alone.
It doesn't help me, Bryson, but thank you. No, but seriously, from a football perspective, the center is a pretty essential piece. He's the guy up front that's actually calling the protections. Everyone thinks that the quarterback pointing at a linebacker and saying 55. No. Any adjustments, any shifting, any of that is on most teams, this one included, between the center and quarterback and all that taking place. And you have to have that communication up front and center before anything else. Literally every play goes through him and the quarterback, right? So yeah, just from the fact that he's a talented football player, from the fact that it's yet another bit of beef that UCF is losing in a time when they need more than ever. This is incredibly problematic.
Why is that, Kyle?
Why it's funny.
Oh, we're going to a conference, aren't we? The Big 12. Uh-oh.
Yeah, exactly. Where guys average 290 or 300,
Here we go.
But that also assumes that UCF won't be able to pick anybody up in the portal who can fill that spot with the size that we're talking about, though.
Right. The portal can giveth just as it taketh away. So as Gus 1223 has constantly told us here on the Black and Gold Banneret through Priest Jeff Sharon. but yeah, no, I don't mean to imply that they can't refill it. All I'm trying to say is now the cupboard's even more bare than it was. It's going to make it a more arduous task.
Eric, I know this is like, I mean, let's call this what it is. It's a major concern. How insurmountable a concern is it?
Put it to this way. Kyle, you have any eligibility? You could play line? Really?
I got bone spurs on my knees,
now,
guys. It's not going to happen.
Eric's like the sky is falling.
No, look, this continues what has been a disappointing finish to this football year. It's been a disappointment. Going back to the Navy game, which you and I were at, Kyle, and I'll give Mark Daniels credit. I was listening to his show on Monday, and he said it best. It's fitting that the season ended in Navy because that's where the season unraveled. And, of course, the season ends at Navy at the bowl game. It's been a lousy last couple of months with on-the-field performance, departures, and, boy, they got a lot of work to do this offseason to get to the Big 12. The one positive from this season is you find out what your holes are going into the Big 12, and, boy, there's a lot of holes they got to fill. Can they fill it? Yes, some of it. But, Kyle, so – fix an entire offensive line, basically replacing it in one off season. That's a big ask, isn't it?
It's a huge ask. And
yeah.
I mean, listen, Lokahi, to his credit, has the right temperament. He has the right level of talent to be a captain, to be an anchor, for all intents and purposes, to be what would now be, granted, not having playing a 6th year, but he's the new Sam Jackson, right? He's going to be the he's going to be the guy that's going to be the statesman in the room. The problem is, at least Sam Jack had Matt Lee and Lokahi in place. Lokahi's not even going to have that same level of, how you say, veteran presence, right? And I know they got some guys that are returning that are on the roster, but nobody that's seen significant field time, certainly not as a starter. And all of that's incredibly problematic. Now, there are other position groups where I think they're pretty solid. Their running back core, even with Isaiah Bowser gone, looking forward to that. They're going to have to help in protection. The tight end part of the room, depending on how things shake out, I don't know how much change is going to happen between then and now, but the names that are on the roster today aren't bad. The receiver core, somehow absorbing O'Keefe's departure. Feeling pretty good about it based on the names that are there today. The portal will giveth and taketh away. And, Bryson will have to update the tracker many times, I'm sure, between then and now. But offensively, I think it's easy to say the quarterback situation and the offensive line are the only ones I'm super worried about.
That's kind of important, Kyle. It's kind of important. It's arguably the two most important positions.
And I'm glad you said that the way you did. I'm not meaning to cheapen it, but there are some places where the squad is Power 5.
Right. Now, here, let me ask you this, Kyle. When you're replacing a brand new offensive line, is the bigger challenge run blocking or pass blocking?
Always pass blocking.
Yeah.
But I mean, here's the thing. I say that because offensive linemen always want to run block, it also depends on the style of player you get. If you're looking to fill up beef and concentrate more on size rather than somebody who's a good athlete, because we all want both, but assuming you'll get both is very tough. JJ Watt isn't born every day from a defensive perspective, right? So if you're looking if you're looking for that guy who's big and a good run blocker, you will sacrifice a little bit of agility. If you get that guy who's agile, he's not moving a Power 5 defensive tackle, defensive end out of the way. So, and that's the tough part when you're weighing any bit of recruiting for an offensive line. I think even Drew would have my back on that one. So,
a couple of things that I wanted to talk about with the postseason as well as we kind of wrap up on the 2022 football season. A couple of developments. Number one, TCU has made the national championship game and will play Georgia, regardless of the result. That's still a remarkable year for Sonny Dykes, and it shows you how good TCU is. And in addition to that, Tulane on the second came back from 15 down with 4 minutes to go to beat Southern Cal in the Cotton Bowl. I said this yesterday. I was like, on one hand, it kind of makes me feel better about the fact that we split 2 games with Tulane in their stadium. On the other hand, it makes me feel like, man, if we had only gotten past them, we might have been able to run over, around, and through that porous USC defense. My God. How do those two developments factor into your analysis of how UCF performed this year and what things look like next year? Eric, I'll start with you.
As far as the TCU thing, I think that's probably the blueprint if you're UCF. But although I think everybody needs to calm down about TCU. Can we stop acting like they're some Cinderella? They're not a Cinderella. They're a Power 5 team that's been in the Big 12, that's underachieved. Remember, they fired Gary Patterson because they felt they underachieved. And Kyle, you even said you felt they should have been in the playoff in 2014. So this is not like some program, like this is not a Cincinnati, this is not a UAB situation. So let's
hold up there, Mister. I love big brands, and I cannot lie. Let's talk about the participants in the national championship game since the playoffs started. All right, I'm going to read you the following names. All right, Ohio State, Oregon, Alabama, Clemson, Georgia, LSU.
Yeah. What conference is TCU in?
Those are the 6 schools that have played in the national championship game. Those are all big time, like legendary football brands. TCU, I don't think
Oregon is. I disagree on Oregon. I think Oregon and TCU are about the same. Honestly, Oregon is so well wanted that the Big Ten doesn't even want a piece of it. But anyway, it doesn't matter.
Yes, it does.
Who cares? It doesn't matter.
Down below Oregon.
Here's the most important thing. TCU's in the Big 12. That's what matters, which is the second best conference in the sport right now behind the SEC. How about that? That's what the significance of that. Okay. And that's not good news for UCF. In fact, I think it's good news for UCF that potentially Oklahoma and Texas are being negotiated to leave a year early, because I want 2 teams less in this conference because it'll make it easier to compete and get to a bowl game. Because to me, for UCF next year, the goal for UCF next year is to get to where Kyle Nash has been. And that's the Cheez-It Bowl. And I'm not being funny about that.
No, I'm smiling.
Kyle, you saw Oklahoma got in a 6-6. Yep. And I watched that game. You covered that game. I'm thinking to myself, my goodness, Oklahoma might destroy us. And they're not that. They had a tough year. So if you're UCF, your goal is to get to
worst year since 1998. Oklahoma.
Yeah, and they look pretty good. So if you're UCF, you got to get to 6 wins to get to bowl eligibility next year, to get you to the Cheez-It Bowl. I do think that's the goal next year. But to do that, this Big 12 is strong, man. It's strong. That's the big take there.
And that's an interesting point you make, which, by the way, I either put this in a chat or I tweeted it out. I hope I put this out in the public, but I don't think so, because somebody would have complained at me. But it wouldn't be a heck of a note where we're talking about meeting expectations and all this, and how 6 wins. So what you're trying to tell me is that UCF fans will be disappointed about the fact that they're about to play in the stadium they used to play in to get into a bowl game that they hadn't been in before.
Well, I think one of the positives of this year is it's going to lower expectations for next year, in my opinion. I think that's what it's going to lower. As far as the Tulane game, Kyle, you and I called it. USC was a fraud. They were a fraud. And the fact they were a win away from making the playoff tells you what a joke the sport is, that USC was in the mix to make the playoff, because they're terrible. Well, they have no defense. Not a lick. None.
Okay, we've seen several good teams with bad defenses.
Okay? Yeah, and that's why, because the sport is mediocre, but that's a whole other story.
I mean, as much as you talk about Oklahoma, I know you're going to acknowledge that too.
Agreed. Oklahoma was a lot of who got to the playoffs through the Big 12, which is the good news for UCF. This is why, if you're UCF, you're making this move, because the Big 12, it's easier to make the playoff in the Big 12 than it is to the American. Obviously.
Eric, you're saying Tulane is weak and they should have just.
Yeah, it's a nice story. It's a nice story. Good for them. It was their year. Awesome moment for them. But I'm not, it's an exhibition game at the end of the day against a very mediocre USC team. And honestly, if it really, I don't want to even bring it
Power
up.
5 is strong with you, man. Oh my
No,
God.
I tell you,
This game didn't matter.
In all seriousness, not a good day for the Pac-12. USC exposed by Tulane, and then Utah got manhandled by Penn State. Good luck. Have fun at Amazon exclusive contract Pac-12. Good luck.
Look,
Yeah,
Eric, look,
I mean, yeah, I'm glad you brought up Penn State too. That was embarrassing. Go ahead, Bryson. Didn't you?
I was just gonna say, look, Tajay Spears, I believe we can say.
Oh, he's a great player.
He's competing on Sundays. That's.
I agree. Listen, we've argued. I agree.
I wouldn't discount USC's defense. I think Spears is just that.
No,
good.
no. USC's defense is bad, but
200
Spears is
yards on
legit.
17 carries and 4 touchdowns last night. That was really something to watch.
And also, Michael Pratt, kudos to him for stepping up when he needed to, because he was not exactly having the best game, and then he carried on that last drive.
Well, here's the big winner at all that, Mike Oresco, who gets the last laugh.
Yeah.
Because Tulane is now established. You still got SMU that's recruiting well. We'll see how that goes. You got Memphis still.
Hold on, Eric. Is Tulane established here?
Yeah, Pratt's coming back.
1 year.
Yeah, that's all it takes.
And
win a
here's
New Year's
the thing.
Six.
They're the first AAC team to win a New Year's Six bowl since
UCF, right?
UCF, that's right.
Right, but that's good for them. They'll probably be a preseason top 25 team next year.
Tulane has been upward trending too for the most part since Willie Fritz came aboard. Let's be clear about that. Yes, I know
they were 2-10 last year, though.
Jeff, settle the heck down. Hold on. Other than that 2020, that 2-10 record. But keep in mind, every coach that came up to playing them, and you could call it coach speak if you want, nobody wanted to play Tulane.
Right.
There was a lot of games, if you look at that schedule, that were within a score that were very close. We have this conversation all the time. They were this close for being this record versus 2-10.
Right.
They may have put that on the schedule. I know you're a guy who goes by the gospel of somebody who said you are what your record says you are. Tulane is proof that platitude is trash, because that was not a 2-10 team.
No, they had some bad luck, and I think they had some good luck this year, so it kind of evens itself out. And when I mean established, they're more established than any school in the Sun Belt, any school in CUSA, any school in the MAC right now. Like, they're going to get the benefit of the doubt over any of those schools, and no one knows that better than UCF, who got a lot of benefit of the doubts the last couple of years, including this year when we were ranked in the top 25 when we probably shouldn't have been. So good for them. That's good for them, and good for Mike Oresco, because the American has separated themselves from the group of 5, and they're going to be fine even with the departures of UCF, Houston, and Cincinnati. I know that disappoints some people, but they're going to be fine.
Yeah, I mean, I don't doubt that. I've said it before. I think that the way it's set up right now is that the group of 5 is now going to be a 2-horse race between the American, who's in the pole position, and on the outside of them is the Sun Belt, because of ESPN's TV contracts.
Well, I think there's a gap, but I think there's a gap.
There's a gap, but there's the American, a gap, the Sun Belt, an even bigger gap, and then everyone else.
The Sun Belt can keep shooting for those Cure Bowl championships, though. They got that going for them. I
mean, it happened this year with Troy. It happened last year with the year before with Coastal. Listen, I mean,
hey, props to Alan Gooch. He was the only bowl game to set up 2 conference champions in a matchup.
Correct. Yeah. I did write about that.
I read it. That's why I got it for you. Think I got it from?
All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about hoops and wrap it up. It's Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. We're back here on the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast as we wrap things up here on this early week show. Kind of wrapping up the football season. We wanted to touch upon basketball, and let's talk about that UCF men's basketball team, guys, because they took Houston right to the gates on just before the new year in Houston, number 3 team in the country. And UCF was a 15.5-point underdog in that game, and ended up losing by 6. Had the lead in the second half, just couldn't quite get over the hump. So they're now at 10-4, 1-1 in the league, and head to East Carolina on Wednesday at 7 p.m. at Mingus Coliseum to hopefully get back above 500 before they come back home on Sunday the 8th for SMU. But I don't know about you guys. I was really impressed with the rebounding performance for UCF against Houston. Even in the loss here, I just wanted to look at the rebounding numbers in total. UCF had 37 total rebounds in this game, 14 on the offensive glass. They were out-rebounded by 4, but those offensive rebounds, I thought, kept them in the game. Houston had 19 offensive rebounds, and the Cougs also shot 37.5%. UCF actually outshot them 38.9 and shot 85% from the line. I tell you, the free throw shooting has also been keeping this team in a lot of games. It, has been winning some games and also keeping them in the games that were close, but certainly kept them in this one. But how do we evaluate this one, Eric? Because, we've seen enough moral victories in the course of our lives, right? But this one felt like, hey, this there's something about this particular team and the chemistry that they have together that looks like it can carry through conference play. That was a tough environment that they played, and they were not fazed by it.
Nope. No, they were good. I mean, they were down 64-61. Ethiel Horton has a shot, three-pointer, corner, open, missed, normally hits. They were, back and forth. I mean, you wondered, because they were down early in the first half. They were down double digits. You're like, oh boy, this could get out of hand, but they didn't. I thought they actually played well offensively, better than I thought, because I had concerns about this offense. But they executed well against one of the best defenses in the country. I mean, Houston's a legitimate national championship contender. I think there's a very good chance when Houston comes here at the end of January that we can make an argument that Houston will be the best team that's ever played at Addition Financial Arena, ever. That's how good they are.
Even better than the Memphis teams.
Memphis, remember, played, So, I mean,
in the old arenas, when
they had the pre-Derrick Rose and the Joey Dorsey and company. The one that came to this current arena was I believe the Tyreek Evans version of Memphis, which I think this Houston team is potentially better. I think they're a Final Four good, and UCF played well. Look, UCF played all well. It's not like this was just a fluky one game. They were a bad break, lucky bank shot away from beating Missouri, who just wiped out Kentucky, and they're ranked in the top 25. Mm-hmm. They were a basket away from beating Miami, who's in the top 15 in the country, and it's once again an ACC championship contender. They beat Ole Miss. They beat Oklahoma State, who nearly upset Kansas over the weekend. So this team has competed against good competition already this year, and they've been rewarded. They are 51 in the net right now. They have made Joe Lunardi's next 4 out. They're not the first 4 out, but they're the next 4 out. So congrats on that list. But this team has an identity defensively that they haven't had since 2019.
Yes.
And they have variety offensively. Kyle, you brought it up earlier in the year. They're not dependent on 1 or 2 guys offensively. We saw that. Horton stepped up in the second half in the Houston game. Darius Johnson could score. Taylor Hendricks could score. Brandon Suggs is a 6-man, can score. They have some different variety. CJ Kelly, I forget. They have different ways of scoring that they haven't had the last few years, Kyle.
Oh, yeah. And then when, DJ needs to take a break, Here comes Jalen Young doing his job. I got to give the JUCO transfer his props because he's always performed when he's had to play big minutes. It's an amazing feat. And by the way, no CJ Walker yet in the lineup. One can only imagine how much of a difference that may or may not make. But listen, it's actually the antithesis to what you were saying throughout last year, Elo, and that this team doesn't really find a leadership, they don't find a focus. This team doesn't need to do that. This is what we were promised in last year's team by Coach Dawkins. And I mean, no offense to him when I say that, because we're getting it this year. Jeff comes out saying, I was impressed by their defense and they're really good on their free throws. A Dawkins team that's good on defense and hits free throws. Mind bending. No, I joke, but yeah, this is what Johnny Dawkins was looking to deliver last year. We definitely got it. This year, it also helps that we have a kid in the starting lineup that's been what, the freshman of the conference for 5 weeks of the season. That doesn't hurt matters any either. And Taylor Hendricks, of course.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to look at some of the stats that they had here, and just to put these things into context. Eric, you mentioned the defense, 19th in the country in scoring defense, giving up only 60.4 points per game. I think that might be the best that we've seen in the Dawkins era.
If not, it's definitely right up there with the taco one.
Right, yeah. 84th in the country in free throw percentage. Okay. 22nd in the country in field goal percentage defense. They're allowing teams shooting just 38.7%, and they're tied for 39th in the country in offensive rebounds per game at 12.71. Yeah, I would say that those are the best numbers that we've seen in those categories since Taco Fall was here. And he almost single-handedly brought those numbers to bear.
Well, and I've talked to Coach Dawkins about that when I filled in on the radio side doing post games for the radio broadcast, and I asked him. See, there's a cheap plug there, Kyle. You were supposed to do the big. Thank you. He had acknowledged this is the deepest front court he's had. I mean, you mentioned C.J. Walker's out, but they've had other guys step in. But they have depth. I mean, Young can play the point and the two because of with Darius's injury earlier in the year. So they have more length, more width. Defensively, I think that's helped them there. So, look, I think this is a nice team. It's a good team. Now, they got a lot of work to do. You got to go to East Carolina. The problem is the American is kind of down, not as quality of a depth as it's been in the past. So you're not going to get the quality wins, quote unquote, but you could certainly get some bad losses that could hurt you, and that would qualify this week with East Carolina. That's a dangerous game. UCF historically has not played well at East Carolina. Remember last year?
ECU is 10-5 this year, by the way, Eric. Sorry to interrupt, but they're
10-5.
Their net is 166.
And that's the problem. So you have to carry this over. To me, for this team to have a realistic shot of the NCAAs, you can't have slip-ups, too many of them. And you're probably going to have to finish third or fourth, top three in the league. But look, there's a lot of promise with this team. It's a fun team to watch. You can go back to the Wichita game, which you and I were at, Kyle, and you were at, Jeff. They couldn't hit a shot. Every shot, the rim was unkind that night, but they found a way to win with defensively. And let me just say this, Darius Johnson is a pleasure to watch. He's a kid that is a winner. Like, he found a way in that Wichita game when the shots weren't going in. He was determined. I'm going to go to the free throw line. I'm going to get points that way. And he helped win that game down the stretch against Wichita. That's an advantage I think UCF will have here, is they're going to have one of the best point guards in the league every night in Darius Johnson.
DJ did the exact same thing against Houston, by the way, going for 6 for 6.
And he was matched up with arguably the other best point guard in the league in Houston, with Sheed. So that was a great matchup.
Yeah. On the other side, I wanted to talk about the women who are at 9-3. They finished up their non-conference schedule against Texas Southern 92-67, took care of business in the way that we expected them they would. They now head into conference play starting, we're recording this on Tuesday, that's tonight, against SMU, 8 p.m. That game will be on, ESPN Plus. And, again, we've talked about, the schedule and how much time this team is going to need to gel. Bryson, I want to start with you. You were at that Texas Southern game. Where is this team right now? Their net is number 127 as they head into conference play. Right now, they're among the leaders in the country in offensive rebounds per game themselves. They're 6th in the country in that category and 13th overall in rebounding, which is always good. I mean, that's what you want to see from a team that's, at least that, is in the state that they are, where it's a bunch of people, that they almost had to throw together. But what do we see might be some of the stumbling blocks here, and what do you think might benefit them as we head into conference play against SMU?
Well, one thing that I noticed against Texas Southern is they actually had a little bit of a hard time defending the three at first. The reason why Texas Southern was actually able to hold on for as long as they did early on in the game was because they allowed some 3-pointers early. There was one woman, they had Micah Gray, who got 33 points on them that night. Coach Messer said that they were focusing on other players, and that's what led to her kind of getting the night that she had. But
she couldn't miss that night. That was really
something. Yes, and they were without their leading scorer, by the way, who was one of the leading scorers in the SWAC as well. So I think that the defense definitely could use some work, especially in the early going, because Texas Southern was really hanging on early on in the game, but they did manage to create separation later on. And thanks to, by the way, Nay Hutton absolutely went off in the fourth quarter. She ended up finishing as the team's leading scorer with 22 points off of the bench, but almost all of her points, I think 12 of 15 or something like that, came in the fourth quarter alone. which was absolutely insane. I talked afterwards to Nay and Rachel Ranke, and Rachel said that this was something that was in her this entire time. This was only her third game since she started this season, because she started in the Christmas Classic after being hurt for a little while. And, we mentioned how this team has been hurt pretty bad over the beginning of the season. Coach Messer said this team was they were fighters. Despite all that, this team has been fighting through that adversity, and now we have one player back in Hutton that really showed us what she can be capable of when she's able to really click it into gear. And in that fourth quarter, we saw what she was capable of. And then, of course, Destiny Thomas is being all reliable, like she is, getting her 7th double-double of the season. She's one of the country's leaders in double doubles, if I'm not mistaken, or at least close to it, so, getting 11 rebounds and 13 points. So as long as she leads those offensive boards and really leads the way in that category, I think this team is going to make some noise with the conference. They just have to really lean into what their identity is. As of right now, UCF is actually the only team in the American that hasn't played a conference game. Right now you have South Florida's at 12-4. Tulsa and Wichita State are at 11-3. Tulane's at 10-4. SMU's at 9-4. And UCF is at 9-3 overall right now. So, Kyle, I wanted to get you in on this too. There are a lot of unknown quantities, I think, aside from South Florida, at least as of right now in the conference. Where do you see this? Where do you see UCF as things shake out, at least in the moment?
I mean, I think UCF has a good opportunity to at least compete for the conference championship, if not outright win it. I mean, the way that Coach Messer has restocked this pantry is something special. And, no offense, Bryson, I hear how shocked you are by Nay Hutton. Bro, I've been trying to tell you since I was at the Christmas Classic that these Barkley comparisons that we got from AAC Media Day from Coach Messer, they're legit, folks. And by the way, Sierra Godbolt doing her thing as a freshman, running the point, her continued performance and consistency in my mind is going to be the key to their success. Bryson, you made the point. If you're going to attack this group, it ain't going to be the post players that you go after unless you think you can outrun them, which good luck with that too. Destiny Thomas is faster than she's ever been as an athlete this year from what I've seen. You attack them through their guards right now, and because that's where the lineup, through numbers, not necessarily talent, is weakest. And listen, I like Maya Burns. She's a solid player. Layla Jewett, the same. Sierra Godbolt's doing her job. But if Rachel Ranking's in and she's not hitting, the next option of who's going to come in, especially with Ashton Verholt still out for the moment, as I understand it, it's the tough part of the lineup where they don't have the most bodies ready to go. And like Coach Messer said to us recently, I think they're now a week and a half into having full practices because they have enough healthy players. So this group itself is still an unknown quantity, Jeff, which is why it's tough to answer your question. But I think they could be a top 3 team in this conference, a tough conference.
Yeah, I think that the health thing is really the one thing that they have to monitor pretty tightly. Eric, I want to get your last word on this too before we wrap it up here, because I know you keep an eye on this conference, and it's weird. I feel like I can't quite get a good feel on it this year.
Well, do you have the net rank? I'm trying to find the net rankings on the way. I know it's this. Here's what we do know: South Florida's the team to beat. They're the team to beat. They've had a good non-conference. They're the heavy favorites. After that, I think it's kind of wide open. By the way, I'm sensing little Bryson Kyle competition here on the women's hoops to see who Cynthia Messer will say the first name first. Will she say Kyle or Bryson at some point this year? I sense that little back and forth competition, gentlemen. I heard that. Holy mackerel.
Reports that off camera she's actually said my name. I just wasn't there to see it. So
that's you're too busy covering New Year's Day bowls and NFL playoffs. That's why you're busy. Being
a big time guy out here. South Florida, by the way, top team in the American in the net at 38. I'm trying to pull down here and see what I'll say. Tulane's at 63 right now.
Yeah.
Memphis at 72. SMU at 82. Tulsa at 84.
It's probably it's one, maybe two bids. Yeah, it's either a 1 or a 2. Ben, South Florida's the team to beat. We know with Jose Fernandez, they always have a good team around. So we'll see what happens, and we'll see how the women start in conference play here this weekend. But that's they've had a little time ups and downs, so we'll see. I'm curious to see how they look in conference. Top 3, bold by there, Kyle. Top 3, that'd be big.
Yeah, well, that's the ceiling. I'm not trying to say they're going to take the entire conference, but if I'm wrong in my prediction and they continue to build, that chance is there. The only problem I have is their guards and their lack of availability and experience right now. But Nate Hutton's huge, Bryson. You're right.
Oh yeah, 22 points in the entire game. That fourth quarter is going to stick in my mind for the rest of the season for her. It's a good standard. It's a good standard to set, though. It's a really good standard to set for her.
Yeah, and I think the one player who I think is going to be key. We saw her finally enter the starting lineup just recently. Sierra Godbolt at point. It's funny, I saw KK right after the last game against Texas Southern. She was at the game, sitting courtside, as alumni do, and I couldn't help but notice like how similar a game Sierra has to freshman KK. It's a little rough around the edges because she's a freshman, but man, can she defend! And she's probably going to be at least a competitor for the Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year at some point by the time she's done here at UCF. I really do think that. So quick recap of the schedule. Tuesday, women's basketball at SMU, 8 p.m. ESPN+. Wednesday, men's basketball, 7 p.m. ESPN+. Saturday, women against Tulsa at home. Sunday, men versus SMU at home as we get started here on focusing really tightly in on basketball. We're going to be diving all in on basketball. And then as the spring sports get going, baseball, softball right around the corner. Eric, I know you're warming up the voice for that.
That's right. A month away from softball season starting, a month away from baseball season starting. Who will be the new UCF pitching coach? We don't know. They don't have one at this recording.
We'll figure it
Hopefully, other many plot lines. We're waiting for an offensive coordinator. This is going to be a pretty busy. Trust me, just because football season's ending, it does not mean it's going to be less busier.
And we're going to be wearing our Big 12 hats on the 8th when TCU plays Georgia.
No Hula Bowl talk. I mean,
Oh yeah, we do have the Hula Bowl coming up on the 14th as well at UCF as well. So that'll be really exciting to see, and a lot of former UCF guys playing in that game as well, having a last hurrah on the field.
Really quickly, Jeff, I have to ask: when you were observing Sierra Godbolt with her playing style, would you say that she battles?
Oh man,
too soon.
Hey, what's better? She's an Orlando native. She's one of two Florida natives on the entire team, and she's the one from Orlando. The other Florida natives from Riviera Beach. So Sierra really had to really be in the hometown.
And you know who else is an Orlando native? KK Wright. Just saying.
Oh snap!
Just saying. All right. Well, thank you for listening here on the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. If you want to follow us on Twitter, you can, so long as Twitter is still up and running. UCF Banneret _SBN. You can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube.
Got some great content. Well. Blackandgoldbanneret.com. Women's soccer year recap, volleyball recap. All going to be on the website. TV numbers, basketball. We got it all.
Don't forget the transfer portal tracker, which Bryson has been diligently updating as information comes in on comings and goings in the transfer portal. And of course, you can always follow us individually. I'm at Jeff_Sharon. Don't forget, Drew is at Statboy Drew. Eric is at Eric Lopez Elo. Bryson's at It's Bryson Turner. And, of course, Kyle is at the SOTG for the student of the game. For all of us here at Black and Gold Banneret, Happy New Year. Let's make it a good one in 2023 because there's a lot that's going to be happening the next 6 months, man. Let me tell you, we got a lot coming down the pike. It's going to start happening real quick. On behalf of all of us, Happy New Year. We'll see you later.